Okay, Kashish, you may proceed.
Okay. A very warm good morning to everyone present here. I, Kashish Kamble, the moderator of the session, presenting on the behalf of Department of Law, Prestige Institute of Management and Research, Indore. I would like to welcome our esteemed guest, Dr. Swasti Rao ma'am, respected faculties, and all our dear students. Today, as a panelist, we have Professor Mr. Kamlesh Jain sir, Assistant Professor Mr. Navrati Dongre ma'am, Assistant Professor Mr. Nakul Singh Chauhan sir, and student coordinators of the EML committee, Ms. Priyanshi Jain ma'am, Mr. Nishant Jain sir, Mr. Shishil Rajpurohit sir, and members of the EML committee, Ms. Garima Shukla, Ms. Muskan Pandey, Mr. Vineet Agrawal, Mr. Yash Pathak, and Mr. Manjeet Singh Jat. It's my great honor to welcome our guest, Dr. Swasti Rao ma'am. Ma'am has a master's in international relations as well as MPhil in East Asian studies from Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. Ma'am also have a PhD in advanced international politics from Tsukuba University, Japan, where she lived for 5 years on the prestigious Japanese Education Fellowship that she received in 2011. Tsukuba University is one of the top 10 universities of Japan and also figures in the top 250 universities globally. She is also a recipient of the Okita Memorial Scholarship in 2010, ICCR, Indian Council for Cultural Relations, and has published original research under those auspices. Her academic and research interests focuses on democracy, civil society, women's empowerment, participatory democracy, and constructivist international relations theory. She has presented academic papers at several international conferences and seminars both in India and abroad, and has published extensively in both theoretical and empirical aspects of her work. She has been the principal investigator for the GSPS, Japan Society for Promoting Science, and Tsukuba University co-funded international project, spearheading a comprehensive review of the civil society sector in India in 2014. Presently, she is teaching at the Department of Security and Strategy Studies, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh, India. She is a trained Kathak artist and an HRD ministry scholar on Kathak and performing arts, and is frequently invited to grace events and deliver keynotes addresses in the capacity as well. Dr. Swasti Rao ma'am is proficient in English, Hindi, Urdu, and Japanese. In today's session, ma'am is going to enlighten us about the current scenario of Afghanistan, which is a very recent issue. Now I request our honorable guest to kindly take over the session. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. Before I start, would any one of you like to tell me a little bit about your university? What is it that you're studying? So it gives me an idea as to, how to place my today's lecture, right? So anyone, any would be, I could request a faculty to do the same, as in what courses are you people studying, and, what really are you doing? If you could tell me in about 2 minutes, 3 minutes,
Yeah,
I would really appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, hi, Professor Nakul Singh Chauhan this side. Ma'am, we are an autonomous institute dealing with legal education since 2015. The current audience in the webinar are our 5th year and 3rd year law students. They are all from the 5-year integrated programs that we offer. So we have students from BA LLB, 5-year program, BBA LLB, as well as BCom LLB.
Okay.
And some of them have international relations and world politics as a subject in this semester. The 9th semester students, or the 5th year students in particular, have international relations and world politics also as a part of their course.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Anything else would be you would like to know from our end?
Okay, so no, I was just wanting to know as to, do they have a background in international law? Do they do South Asian security? It was just, that I was trying in a little bit to understand. Okay, no problem. What we can do is that we can, start right away. I have made some slides for you, of course. And what I will also do is that whatever questions you have, so, you can sort of keep those questions for the end of the presentation, and then also identify yourselves when you're asking those questions, and the questions would be asked directly in the chat box, or whichever way is fine. I think the chat box way is really good, so I could take 2-3 questions and then try to answer them. like that. Okay, so what we have here today is that a very, very messy situation. So before I start presenting the slide and everything, let me just tell you a little bit. And what I'll try to do, I think I have about 45 minutes to go, right? So I've timed my presentation for about 45 minutes. And then as we end, what we'll do is that we will, look at what is happening in Afghanistan, right? So let me begin. Um, you know, Today's presentation, I have called it Afghanistan Factor in India's Security Matrix. And if you give me a minute, what I'll do is that I'm finding difficulty to share my this thing on Zoom. So maybe what I'll do is that I will try to join the meeting again, and then perhaps it will work. I don't know why, but this is not working. So give me a second. I'll leave the meeting and join again. Is that okay? Is
Yes,
that fine?
ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
All right,
Sure.
fine. Just give me 2 minutes, okay? Just give me 2 minutes because some problem. Okay.
I also would like to inform the participants that there is a Q&A box, Q&A section that is available to you. So if you want to ask any questions to ma'am, it can be during the session or after the session. You can write the questions in the Q&A box, and we'll take up some of the questions towards the end of the session.
Okay, so I'm very sorry. I had to refresh, am I audible to everyone? Am I
Yes,
audible to
ma'am.
everyone? Okay, so I had to refresh my
Yes, ma'am.
Zoom. Okay, so I'm sorry about that. And now that I've refreshed my Zoom, for some reason my camera has become green. Okay, so what I'll do is that I'll just switch off the camera for the while, do away with the presentation, and then I'll switch on the camera, right? And I will just keep checking. So I had to refresh. Okay, so let's not waste time. I'll start sharing my screen, and this is what I intend to start, right? Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So I have a lot of slides because I was not very sure about how familiar are you with all this. So what I'll do is that I'm going to be I'll start talking. If there is a problem with respect to audio or something, so feel free to let me know. Okay, please feel free to let me know. So like I said, Afghanistan factor in India's security matrix is what I intend to talk on today. It will be about what has happened after the Taliban takeover and what is the broader Indian national interest. Okay, so I presume that you have little bit understanding of what is happening in our neighborhood. I have tried to be very, very simple. I have tried to not use a lot of jargons, and as we go ahead, you'll be able to see, what is it that I'm trying to, share with you. So let me share my screen this way. And so, what really has happened? A group called Taliban. I'm sure all of you know that it's a terrorist organization, but we are going to be looking more carefully at what the Taliban is like. So what has happened is a group called Taliban has taken over Afghanistan in August of 2021, right? So we all know that. Now, some of the questions that come to our mind, and also some of the questions around which I have made today's presentation, is that what is the Taliban? Of course, the first thing, who were in Afghanistan prior to the Taliban takeover, and this is a typo. Prior to the Afghan takeover, the Taliban that took over, that Afghan takeover that has happened. What is the US war on terror? You must have heard about this thing called, that US was fighting a very long war on terror in Afghanistan, and they retreated, they'd lost the war, etc. While on the other hand, the United States of America says that, oh, we did not retreat. It's just that we saw that there was no point being in those countries and fighting these wars that really don't have any end. So other questions that come to our mind are, why did the US leave Afghanistan? What is the role of Trump administration and Bush, and before that the Bush administration, and now the Biden administration, etc., the successive administrations? Who are the major international players in the Taliban takeover? In the sense that, why is it that everybody is talking about the Taliban takeover of the Afghan, land? What is so special about it? Why are countries like India and China and Russia and Iran and Pakistan and USA? Okay, I mean, we do not share borders with Afghanistan. What is our problem with them? So how do you make sense of that? What is that type of selfish national interest that each one of these international players exhibit? Okay, when it comes to Afghanistan, how is the Afghan security, Afghan stability, Afghan political, landscape affecting the national interest of these major players? And then, since we are talking from the context of India, I would like to discuss in detail about what is the role of India, and how does the Afghan situation affect India's security matrix and national interests? Okay, so I think these are the things that would come to anybody's minds, and I have already done, I think in August alone, by now, by September, I think I've already done about 20 either news bites or little lectures on what is happening in different aspects of what is happening in Afghanistan. So today, what I'm intending to do is that I'm intending to give you a kind of an overview of what has happened, and then discuss India. And then also, when you will ask me questions, we can always take up, okay, as to whatever really you feel was not covered. So one of the things that I would like to tell you before I get into what is happening in Afghanistan is that understand, when the Soviet Union disintegrated, when the Cold War ended, if you do not know what it is, you can ask me later. But around the late 1980s, early 1990s, and technically 1991 was the time when the Soviet Union disintegrated. And when the Soviet Union disintegrated, the world, which was earlier marked by this great power rivalry between these two superpowers, okay, on the one hand was America, on the other USA, and the other hand was Soviet Union. That rivalry, which is also known as Cold War in international politics lingo, that came to an end. And United States emerged as the most powerful hegemonic power of the world, unprecedented in power, whether it was economy, whether it was military, whether it was technical, you name it. So this period, and please try to grasp as to what exactly am I trying to say. So this period of the the US supremacy lasted till about 9/11. Why? Because we all know what is 9/11. 9/11 was a terror attack on the United States of America, where the Twin Towers were brought down, in a suicide, bombing. Okay, and the planes were crashed, etc. So what was so special about it? Ultimately, it was a terrorist attack. Yes, it was unprecedented, but what precisely is something which is so special about it, right? Now, if you can see my cursor, what I want to tell you is that in IR, we try to make our students understand that there is a basic difference between how wars were fought in the olden times. And when I say old times, I do not mean 100 years ago. I mean, till about 30, 40 years ago, okay, almost around the end of the Cold War, and the new wars, okay. Most of the old wars, the imagination that comes to your mind when I say an old war is that old wars were typically interstate conflicts, okay? When I say interstate conflicts are those conflicts where, you can apply the international humanitarian law, etc., a lot of things, international law, like classic wars, right? Between countries, like, for example, the Second World War, countries fighting against countries, India-Pakistan war, we've had 4 wars, the India-China war, the Armenia-Azerbaijan war, which just happened last year. So, like, those are the old school wars where the two belligerents are basically two countries, or in other words, two nation states. But the new wars, okay, new wars are mostly intrastate. Think of a civil war. Think of a genocide, okay? Think of a separatist movement. Those kind of wars are, intrastate. They are happening within the boundaries of the state. So the other characteristic that we come to is that one party, when we say that it is a kind of an asymmetric war, so at least one party is often asymmetric. It is a non-state actor, right? So what is an asymmetric warfare? Where nations, there are on the one hand, there is a nation state, and on the other hand, there is a non-state actor. And not just that, in the time that the war was being fought, a variety of state and non-state players get entangled. So what happened to USA on 9/11, okay, which was 20 years ago, Al-Qaeda signifies as an asymmetric belligerent that challenged the most powerful nation state on earth, right? Okay, so suddenly a terrorist organization becomes so important that it can challenge the most powerful country in the world. What other things is it telling us? Okay, so one of the things that is telling us that this war is a different type of war. On the one hand is a nation state, on the other hand is a non-state actor. And not just a non-state actor, there are questions of identity. Okay, they are not rational actors. When it comes to the question of identity, we cannot expect rationality guiding us, okay? Because otherwise, you would argue that why the hell is Afghanistan the problem that it has become today? It is completely irrational. Why don't these people want to live with democracy? Why don't these people want to live with human rights? Which human being on earth does not want to live with human rights, okay? And the problem is that you cannot explain the Afghan situation with these rational categories that we are so used to hearing. And as I go ahead in my lecture, I will also tell you that this is one of the most important reasons why not only USA failed in Afghanistan, but also the Indian approach, failed in Afghanistan. And then we were, in a way, forced to actually have official talks with the Taliban representative, which happened a few days ago. The Indian ambassador, okay, Deepak Malik had an official meeting with Tariq Zai, who was, representing the Taliban. Now, of course, we are going to be looking at all of these things in detail. What I really want to tell you is that if you want to understand the nature of asymmetric warfare, you have to really step out of the boxes that you have been thinking in, okay? The boxes of regular wars, the boxes of international law, the boxes of human rights. No, you cannot check any of these boxes when we are talking about asymmetric wars, which are very, very complicated, which have the questions of identity, which are intrastate, where different types of players get involved and it becomes a mess of an entanglement, right? And it also tells us that power is never residing with one actor in international system. The nature of power is such that it is constantly shifting base. Okay, power is never with one country or player alone. If you go back in history, there was a time when UK, United Kingdom was the unchallenged naval power. Before that, France was the unchallenged, France was a very important power. Portugal was a very important power. Then with the decline of European states, America became a very dominant power. Then the Soviet Union also became a power, etc. Then with the decline of Soviet Union, America became the only important power. And then now China has become an important power. And these are still countries, okay? What else? Power is also residing with huge corporates. Power is also residing with non-state actors like, the terrorist outfits. Power is also residing with, for example, the big NGOs in the world. And power is also, who decides what kind of power will be wielded is also decided by global commons. What about the challenge of climate change? What about the challenge of the pandemic? Right? So what we realize is that power doesn't stay with one player alone. The power is transitioning from one country to another, and also from one type of actor to another type of actor. So we have to understand the whole world, okay? Do you know that Taliban is still, considered a terrorist organization at the United Nations? But having said that, United Nations and the meetings that are happening in United Nations are bringing about a change in the language. From a terrorist group, they are becoming a radical group. Why is this shift coming? Why has the world forgotten the Taliban's, Taliban's behavior, their absolutely destructive, humiliating behavior to women, etc. I mean, has the world forgotten? Is that so? Or is that because of the fact that the whole world is realizing that today Taliban is an important factor if we want to understand the Afghan situation? And see, we do not want to understand Afghan situation because Afghanistan is a country in the world. We in India want to understand the situation at Afghanistan because we are directly impacted. We have billions of our dollars invested in Afghanistan, right? Whatever cross-border terrorism we've been facing for the last so many years is going to get really impacted by what kind of Taliban is there in Afghanistan. We are handling the menace of China on the one hand, Pakistan on the other hand, and now when Taliban is friendly with both China and Pakistan, what sort of a security threat is it going to bring to India? That is why we have to talk to them, right? So when I made sure that you understand this concept of power transition and power diffusion well, because without this you will not be able to understand why somebody or a group that was considered a terrorist by, until yesterday is suddenly today, everybody's talking to them as if they are very legitimate. It's not that, diplomacy is not something which is existing in silos, in isolated silos. Diplomacy has to make sense to whatever is happening on the ground. And if you look at the ground level, you will always see that the ground level, the picture is very clear. Power is never residing with one actor alone. It shifts from actor to another actor, not just in terms of the countries, also in terms of one type of actor to another type of actor. So the situation that we have today is a very fluid situation. The unipolar world has ended. There has been challenges to US hegemony, not only from a non-state actor, and in this slide I'm referring to Al-Qaeda. After that, we will see a whole host of different types of actors, right? I hope this point is very, very clear. Please remember, this is the crux of international politics, that power doesn't stay with one actor alone. And that is why we see the rise and fall of whoever we consider the most powerful actors in international politics. Right now, what does the current world scenario look like? In the previous slide, I tried to give you a little bit about this. On the one hand, you see that the current world scenario is marked by ambiguity. Why do I say ambiguity? Ambiguity because on the one hand, we have something like a pandemic, which is telling the human race to come together and work together. And on the other hand, we have return of great power rivalry. For example, US and China. They know that being the two most important nations of the world, they have to sit down together and tackle situations like the pandemics or the climate change, for example. Climate change is coming up in a big, big way. Climate change, one very, very important climate change meeting is scheduled for November in Glasgow, England, later this year. And I would urge all of you to follow it very, very closely, because the future of humanity actually depends on what really these countries come and accept. Okay, I mean, what conditions are they accepting at those climate change meetings are actually very important for our survival, because we have already reached at the brink, okay, of human destruction. So on the one hand, while we have these global commons and the pandemics and these problems, which is pushing the world to come together, on the other hand, instead of a unified approach, we are seeing the return of great power rivalry. There are expanding defense budgets, whether it's countries like Japan or India or US or China. There is a race happening in outer space. So this particular thing, gives an understanding that the current world order is slightly ambiguous. When you say ambiguous, something which is not clear. Ambiguous is something which is not clear, which is marked by some sort of confusion. Okay. Now, what does India do in this kind of a world scenario? Okay. For India, as if you've been noticing what the Indian foreign minister, a very, very able man, he was an foreign services officer, and now he's the Minister of External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Now, S. Jaishankar is a very pragmatic man, He has said that in this current ambiguous world order, India's foreign policy stands to gain the most, not by joining hands with a particular camp, So basically, India's foreign policy will not gain much by falling in the lap of USA or falling in the lap of Russia or falling in the lap of China, etc. No, India's geostrategic location is such that India's foreign policy has to have, these two important elements. Okay, one is called plurilateralism, and the other is called strategic autonomy. They're very, very easy words. Don't get carried away by how difficult they sound. Basically, let me tell you the easier one first, the strategic autonomy. Basically, strategic autonomy says that in India's interest, it makes sense to have independent relations with most of the dominant powers. So just because we are close to USA for, say, for example, the Indo-Pacific or the Quad construct, it does not mean that India is joining a military alliance with USA like Japan, okay? Or just because India has, cultural and historical and, strategic relations, very good relations with Russia, does not mean that India is joining the anti-USA camp. Okay, now you could say that, but all right, is this not fence sitting? And as luck would have it, the most logical, you may have heard of this word called Pareto optimal. Okay, so the most optimal solution to whatever ambiguity is there in the world order today, India needs to be strategically autonomous, which means that India needs to be strategically independent enough to pursue its interests. And as I will come to the question of Iran and Russia, you will understand it even better. Okay, so India, because of the strategic autonomy, of course, we can spend a lot of time criticizing whether the strategic autonomy is okay or how much strategic autonomy is okay in current situations, etc. But we can debate that, of course. But the basic category remains that it is in India's interest not to align too much with one power, but to keep their strategic options open. And because of this approach, India has been successful in forging a close relationship with the US. See, US is also nobody's friend. Let's remember, we are not talking about friends, we are talking about national interests. Okay, so there are no friends, permanent friends or enemies, but there are lasting national interests. And even the national interests keep changing. Okay, that's another very, very important basic guiding rule for understanding IR and the happenings. So having said that, it makes sense for India to have that strategic autonomy and then also pursue multilateralism as and when required. Now you say multilateralism is something that you understand, right? Multilateralism means what? Multilateralism means tackling a problem with as many factors or as many actors that can be managed, correct? Okay. So if this is what multilateralism is, for example, United Nations is a multilateral organization, right? Okay. Then what is plurilateralism? Okay, so the little difference is that multilateralism means big groups, while plurilateralism means smaller groups. If you have ever thought, of, or if you've ever heard of groups like the India, Australia, France trilateral, India, Japan, Russia trilateral, those trilaterals, the quadrilaterals, these are pluralistic, groups. And India says that, well, multilateralism is great, but it is not able to deliver everywhere. So, well, you can criticize that plurilateralism, can be dubbed as grouping, but actually it could be more deliverable centric, okay? As convergence of interest is clearer and the focus is sharper, right? So 2-3 countries are getting together for a particular thing is better than 50 countries getting together, because 50 countries, that means nothing is happening, right? So why am I saying these two concepts are important is because these two concepts are going to tell you how India is shaping its Afghanistan policy, right? So we are going to come back to plurilateralism and strategic autonomy in a while. Let's go ahead. This is how Afghanistan looks, right? Why did I say, if you look at my cursor, so this is Afghanistan, this is here, this is Kabul. The countries here, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, these are all Central Asian republics. Here is China, this is Pakistan, and here is India, and here is Iran. So naturally, then Iran, Pakistan, China, and Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, above these three is Russia. So these countries become important in whatever is going on in Taliban, right? Okay, this is what I wanted to show. What else? Now, what really has happened in Afghanistan? Taliban have not come to Afghanistan for the first time. Talibans have been there in Afghanistan in an earlier stint from 1996 to 2001. In 1996, and Afghanistan has been really, we are not going to go into the history. You can ask me a question if you want later on. But basically, Afghanistan has had a very, very bloody history, especially the recent history. There was Soviet invasion there, and then there were 10 years of fighting between the Soviets and the Mujahideens, and the Mujahideens were, funded by US at that time because there was Cold War, etc. Anyway, we come to that. What I want to say is that Taliban have not really been in Afghanistan for the first time this time. They had a brief stint in Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001. When they had usurped power, they had ousted the ruling government. And that was the time, if you remember, as Indians, I'm sure you people must or may not have been born also, they bombed the Bamiyan Buddhas and the whole world was, absolutely shocked as to what is happening. Then in 2001 came the 9/11 attack, right? That I told you was an asymmetric, the beginning of the asymmetric warfare, etc. After the September 11 attacks, at that time, US President was George Bush. And, he made a request to the Taliban leadership to hand over Osama bin Laden because Taliban and Al-Qaeda have been close. And Osama bin Laden was the prime suspect in the attacks. Later on, he actually, claimed responsibility, etc. What the Taliban did? The Taliban refused to hand bin Laden over. And they said that you first give us evidence, whatever. They said that I'm not going to hand over my brother. Okay. And then this was happening in, around September, October. And then when they refused, so US together with the NATO allies, I'm sure you know about NATO. NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which means it is a military treaty of US, the military alliance of the Western world, which is led by US. Now, US, together with its NATO allies, launched what is called the Operation Enduring Freedom on October 7th, 2001. By December, in about less than 2 months, US and its allies had driven the Taliban from power. And Taliban, you know what they did? So they left power and they ran away in the mountains. They went and hid in Pakistan, and then in Pakistan and ISI, okay, the intelligence, the services of Pakistan, they started to give them shelter, food, etc. I mean, that link is also really well known. So this is how Taliban ran away from Afghanistan and hid in the mountains and started to live their lives. And basically, they started to build, and US started to chase them away, and US started to begin building military bases, and US took it upon themselves that now we are going to, of course, they were still looking for Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was caught, and, he was killed during the presidency of, Obama administration. So that came much later. But what I'm trying to tell you is that when USA chased away the Taliban from Afghanistan, they started to, build the country, reinstate democracy and reinstate human rights, etc. And what was set up was the International Security Assistance Force, which was later created by United Nations Security Council. They started training the Afghan National Army, etc., to how to oversee military operations, etc., etc. What was the Taliban doing? Taliban, while all this was happening in USA, Taliban launched numerous attacks on Afghan forces, government facilities, and any organization that they believed were in alliance with the US. And then began this, this long era of suicide bombing, terrorist bombings, sometimes at the embassies, sometimes in European countries. It just picked up. Basically, Al-Qaeda and Taliban are both Sunni jihadi groups wanting Islamic Emirate and Islamic, the jihad, the Islamic, rule over the world. Al-Qaeda has global intentions and ambitions, while Taliban is a regional. Taliban is focused on Afghanistan, but Al-Qaeda, the big brother, has global intentions, okay? America took it upon themselves for what? For instating democracy, liberal order in a country like Afghanistan. And that was such an incorrect decision for USA, because USA has this old habits die hard. There is an adage which goes like old habits die hard, and USA has been doing that for most of the Cold War. They got involved with Vietnam. They kept fighting the war for 25 years, did nothing, came out, lost money, lost support, everything. Their international credibility suffered. Similarly, in Afghanistan, after 20 years, they realized that they cannot change the fate of the Afghani people. And we will see. Actually, I'm today very much interested in showing you where the funding has gone and how the funding has happened and why the situation in Afghanistan is directly related with this global economic problem. Okay, let's see. So when US entered Afghanistan, and from after 2001, when after 2001 to 2021, there have been a number of Afghan peace processes, okay? And this has been happening off and on, and it really kind of picked up around the 2018. But this entire 20-year, period is a time where we saw different types of Afghan peace processes happening. So Afghan peace process basically comprises of different proposals and negotiations. Basically, they were brought to end this war in Afghanistan that began in 2001. Now, like I said, that all these negotiations and peace movements for our current interest, they intensified in 2018 because there were talks that were happening with Taliban, etc. Taliban is the main insurgent group which was fighting against the then Afghan government, etc. Right? So now you have an idea. Okay. Besides the United States, what is interesting to remember is that besides the United States, major powers such as China, India, Pakistan, Russia, as well as NATO. Okay, we are not going to give too much time on NATO because otherwise it just becomes an unending, talk. They played a very, very important part in facilitating the peace process. Most of these talks were happening in Doha, which is in Qatar. And Qatar is also, that is what makes Qatar also an important, so to say, player in whatever is happening in Afghanistan. And for all practical reasons, this point here, the peace treaty, which was signed between the US and the Taliban on February 29th, 2020, this is the peace treaty under which it was decided that within 14 months, the Taliban, the US troops are going to withdraw, okay, if Taliban upheld the terms of the agreement. What were the terms of the agreement? We will see that also, but we'll try to cut it short and see what were the terms. In short, the terms were like they will make an inclusive government. They will not encourage the, extremist groups like Al-Qaeda. They are going to check the ISIS chapters. They are going to basically fight the ISIS, terrorists. They are not going to, wreak havoc on women and children, etc. Those were the promises that were made, okay? And this is what, taken all together, is called the Afghan peace process. Now, this is a typical picture that was there all over the internet, which is the meeting of the US envoy and Taliban representative at Doha, which was February of 2020, like I just said. And, just look at this, yeah, just look at this. So 20 years ago, these people were running, right? They are one of the most dreaded terrorist organizations in the world. And here they are sitting and signing a deal. Does it not occur to you is that why is the United States of America, after pumping in billions and billions of dollars, and just wait a minute, when I tell you the money that they gave, okay, or that they have spent in Afghanistan in 20 years, you are going to be in for a shock. Before I get there, before I get to the figures, just ask yourself this question. Why is it so that a country as smart as the United States of America, after spending billions, actually trillions of dollars in Afghanistan, their time, their money, their people, casualties, are just to keep these guys, right? You can see my cursor, these guys at bay. Why is the same United States of America sitting down and striking a deal with them? Why not the Afghan government? For God's sake, is this not a logical question that comes to your mind? Right? So we will come to that, okay? We will come to why on earth did the Americans not talk with the people that they wanted to support and they supported for 20 years, but actually had a deal with these guys, okay? We will come to that. One sec. Let us first see what were the major takeaways of the deal that happened. The takeaway was of the February 2020 deal between Trump administration and Taliban. So the February 2020 deal signed by the US and NATO allies with the Taliban was a result of multiple rounds, like I've said, and this gentleman sitting there was Zalmay Khalilzad. This guy, he's a US envoy, and this guy is a Taliban official. So about after 9 rounds of talk, Khalilzad announced that US would withdraw their troops from Afghanistan. There would be an RIV, which is reduction in violence and reduction in violence. So as you reduce the violence, we are going to reduce the troops. So this is going to be a proportionate reduction, etc. Everything sounds so beautiful, so nice, okay? But and the Taliban also agreed to committing to reducing violence and preventing groups such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS Khorasan. What is Khorasan? Khorasan is a province in Afghanistan, and ISIS Khorasan, you've heard about ISIS, I'm sure. ISIS is Daesh, the Islamic State of, Syria and Islamic State of Syria and Iraq, right? And it's also called Levant and Daesh, right? So ISIS Khorasan is that affiliate of ISIS which works within Afghanistan. And before you try to think that, okay, so I'm beginning to understand what this whole mess is all about, let me tell you, Taliban is friendly with Al-Qaeda, okay? But Taliban is not friendly with ISIS, okay? Very strange, because all three are Sunni jihadi groups, okay? So this also kind of destroys a kind of stereotyping that we usually do. And I think a lot of people who are not into international politics love to do the stereotyping of the jihadi outfits and everybody is the same. No, if you go there, you'll see that even they have major problems, differences. So Al-Qaeda is big brother to Taliban, but ISIS is anti-Taliban. And ISIS Khorasan was basically the group which actually did that bombing, that bombing that happened at Kabul airport in August, that was actually done by Khorasan, and the Talibanis have killed the Khorasan leader, way back a few months ago. And Khorasan is really mad, they want to take revenge. So basically, we will get to this problem again. Why? Because Darren will enter the angle of Russia. So don't worry, let's focus on this. Taliban agreed to committing reducing violence and preventing groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS from operating on Afghan territory. Okay. Now I told you that Taliban is also promising that we'll be good boys and, just go away. We are going to make inclusive government. We are going to take care of women. We are going to take care of this and that. Okay. We are going to provide amnesty. By the way, amnesty is the most favorite Taliban phrase, okay, of the season. Taliban loves to come and say that, we have provided amnesty, amnesty as in whatever you did before the takeover. Now we have already forgiven it. Okay. And we don't plan to take any revenge. Okay. Let's see how seriously the world take them, how seriously they take their own promises. We'll see. So who are the Taliban? There's so much talk about Taliban. Yes, they are a terrorist group. What else? Taliban they refer to themselves as Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. It's a militant organization that operates in Afghanistan. I showed you the map, which is a country in Central and South Asia. The Taliban emerged in 1994. They were basically a group of students, okay? And in 1994, they emerged. They took advantage of the power vacuum that was left following the aftermath of Afghan civil war. If you remember, I told you that Afghanistan has had a bloody history. They've been fighting wars and wars and wars. It's been really terribly unstable ever since the late 70s, okay? And this particular group is basically composed of Afghan religious students who studied in Afghan madrasas as well as in Pakistani madrasas during the time as refugees. And some of them had also fought in the Soviet-Afghan war under the leadership of Muhammad Umar. Muhammad Umar is the founding father of the Taliban. Okay? Mullah Umar, also known as Mullah Umar. Now, like I said, that I want to take you through the US expenditure. And this is where you get an understanding of how massive this war is and why should everybody be concerned about whatever is happening in Afghanistan and the takeaways. From 2001 to 2021, US spent almost $2 to $3 trillion, $2 to $3 trillion, okay? Which amounts to saying that's almost $300 million per day, every day for 2 decades. Can you imagine that? $300 million being spent every single day for 20 years. Which means, in other words, that USA is spending $50,000 on every single person of Afghanistan's 40 million people. Do whatever crazy math you want to do. The number is staggering. The number is staggering enough that we cannot make sense of this money, $2 to $3 trillion. And now the most important thing. Most of that money is not going for development. Why? They are going to the middlemen, to the contractors, okay? And for 20 years, US spent this money for reinstating liberal order and democracy in Afghanistan. There were about 2,500 military deaths of Americans, 4,000 civilian deaths. Compared it with Afghan deaths, 69,000 Afghan military police died, 47,000 civilians died. 51,000 opposition fighters died. Okay, all of this happened, and US just left. US just gave away whatever remaining, whatever they had trained the Afghan army for 20 years. US just walked away. Taliban came, took those weapons from Afghan army, and today they have bases, they have rifles, they have Kalashnikovs, they have everything. What sort of a joke is happening? We need to make, that is why India is so worried about what is happening in, Afghanistan. And we will see, okay, what this, it's like it appears like a madhouse. There is some order to this chaos. We will get to there. But I first want really you guys to know that this is a very, very serious, a very, very chaotic, and a very, very scary situation. The cost of this Afghanistan war that I've been discussing, okay, the cost of this war has been getting financed with borrowed money. Where does the US borrow? The US borrow, it is the national debt. More than 500 billion has already been paid in interest. Okay. And by 2050, it is estimated that the cost of interest alone on the Afghan war debt could reach about 6.5 trillion. So the war has already costed us 2 to 3 million and another 3 million to just pay off the war debt, right? Now, what this borrowing has done, that the borrowing has raised US budget deficit, increased the national debt, macroeconomic effects like consumer interest rates are going up. Government debt to GDP, in US is expected to reach around 115% by the end of 2021. Even by July, by the time the data that I saw for this presentation, it was about 28.5 trillion debt. Okay. Now, what is this? What is all this money? And now just try to understand that this money on the one hand, okay, and then we talk about decoupling from China. How do you decouple from China if your economy is in such mess? If you fought a war for 20 years that you left with completely empty-handed, how are you going to decouple from China? These are very important existential questions that we have. Of course, there are certain, efforts and attempts that are being made, right? And if, later in the question answer session, I would like to take it up as to what really is US doing, etc. But